love to hear about how your book came about. Was writing a book a goal that you had always had and you sort of figured out a way to make it happen? Or was somebody like, hey, you know a lot and you should write a book because that information is valuable?
Let's see. After Leapfrog, I did a little bit of consulting, mostly for Audible.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then I went to ShotSpotter to make gunshot location systems.
Mhm.
And then I left ShotSpotter and at ShotSpotter, I like ever since HP, they kept trying to make me a manager, and that's pretty much when I would leave the job. But at ShotSpotter, they succeeded in making me a manager and then a director. And I hired a lot of people and I interviewed a lot more. I didn't know how to give them my experience. They came from
Mm.
software and they were afraid of the hardware. They came
Mm.
from hardware and they didn't believe in version control. How do you find the person that's both? And so I started developing a library. These are the books that you probably should read. These are the things you might want to think about.
Mhm.
But I was bemoaning the fact that the design patterns really hadn't
Mhm.
made it into embedded systems.
Mhm.
I mean, there's such a great software tool of having, I mean, it's kind of like the Forrest Mims circuits. Everybody knows what they are and what they mean, and nobody uses them exactly as they are. But once you say that circuit name, everybody knows what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
design patterns are like that everybody knows what you're talking about. Nobody uses the state pattern straight out of the book. Just accept it. But once you know what the state pattern is, it's better. So I was whining to a colleague who was also a manager at a different company, and we were talking about books in our libraries and what we would want to put in a library for new embedded software engineers.
Mhm.
And with the whole design pattern whining, he said, "Well, why don't you write that?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I have time." And then I went home and drew up a proposal for O'Reilly. And there were a couple things with their proposals. They say, if you spell our name wrong, we will never talk to you, which, given how my name is spelled, I totally get it. And then they said it would take 6 weeks before anybody talked to you.
Mhm.
It was 3 days.
Now, did you know anybody at O'Reilly going in?
It was
A
total
complete
cold call.
cold call.
Yeah. And so it worked out. I had my proposal. I had a great editor. I had major life crises that made it so that I didn't ever want to go outside. And I spent 9 months writing the book. I did do contract work at that time as well,
Mhm.
working on smart credit cards.
Ah,
Uh,
interesting. So it's interesting that you say Audible because I'm like, "Oh, wow, well that it doesn't sound like much of an embedded system." Like it's basically a computer and a speaker, right? But maybe there's more going on there that I'm not thinking about.
well, we didn't have iPhones. We
Okay.
had Zen Creative or the iPod was
Ah, okay.
first coming out. And so there were
Right.
all these competitors for MP3 players.
Mhm.
And Audible wanted to work on all of them, and all of them worked on different chip platforms. And that was where I
Ah.
was starting to be able to borrow the $10,000 chip kits so that I could write software for Audible.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a matter of doing their decryption, encryption, download, encoding, all of that on the TI C2000 chips,
Hmm.
and then on the analog sharks, and then just all of the chips. And we even did a pick. So I got to see a lot of chips,
Crazy.
and I mean, that really helped as far as what
There we
how the insight into the industry.
go. Interesting.
Plus, the
Interesting.
Audible guys were really cool, and if you got put on hold,
Mhm.
they played Charlotte's Web. So there was
That's kind of
always the
awesome.
temptation to ask them to put you back on hold if you were at a good part.
Why don't more people do that? Like, I think that that should just be the default hold music now that I know that that's possible, right? Oh. So the process for writing this book then was it I mean, it sounds like the material was pretty much up to you in terms of like what to write about and how to structure it and how you said that you came up with a proposal. How long then did it take? How much time did you take to sort of plan the book? And how long did it take you to write it? And how much did you have to learn in order to write the book? Because I know anytime I try to teach something, I'm like, oh, I don't really know how to explain this, or I sort of know that it's true, but maybe not the nitty gritty details of why. And so I know I always learn stuff more when I try to explain it to other people.
Oh, yeah, and teaching the classwork class you took,
Yeah.
I felt like every day I was teaching was a giant quiz on all of my past embedded knowledge. So, yes, teaching is very much a matter of learning.
Yeah.
I really liked the design patterns, but I also, as I said, I knew nobody actually used them out of the box,
Yeah.
and that I was one of the people who did not actually use them out of the box.
Yeah.
So my versions of my design patterns were ones not ones I had developed. They all started with the canonical ones, but definitely I had wandered off. So I did a lot of research into design patterns from the Gang of Four book and from the Head First Design Patterns books. I really liked those. They made a lot of sense. And they usually put things in metaphors or concrete terms, and that's better for me. Give
Hmm.
me an example with a cat in it, and I'm all yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was a lot of research in that. And then there was picking, I didn't want it to be about one chip. So I picked 3 chips and then keep going back to them throughout the book.
Mhm.
And so there was some learning on those chips to make sure that I had it all right. They were all chips I'd used before, but not used in the last 6 months before.
Mhm. Yeah. So there's some brushing up.
Yeah. And I spent a lot of time on how can I explain this to someone who is not at a computer, which I guess now is the
Mm.
style of technical book. But I read technical books at the beach. That was the only time I really read nonfiction. Now I read nonfiction a lot more, but I got into nonfiction by reading an E.O. Wilson book about ants. And it was the coolest thing. And I didn't have to be in a lab. I didn't have to be anywhere. I could just be somewhere I enjoyed. And that's what I wanted from my book. I did not want it to be 90% code. I did not want it to be something that you had to be at your desk for. I
That
wanted it to be something you learned and thought about and put away and then pulled out when you needed it because you knew it was in there somewhere.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I most of your book, which I read during class, what I read outside on the like my outside couch because I wanted to get fresh air and be in a relaxed and receptive thinking mode in order to, absorb and really think about what it was I was reading. Because I felt like if I was in a different setting that I would resort to skimming and my brain would be thinking about something else at the same time. And yeah, no.
But then there are also like Python cookbooks where you have to be at your desk because that's what
Yes.
the book's for.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah.
So yes,
Yeah.
I'm glad you read it outside. That is appropriate. Thank you very much.
It wasn't the beach, but 10 miles away from the beach. So now who who edited your book and who was not only the kind of, I guess, grammatical editor, but did you also have a technical editor who was reviewing Yeah, and how did they provide one, or did you have to provide one? How was that process?
They provided one for sure. Andy Oram was my technical interviewer, but
Mhm.
I would write a chapter and then I would give it to my husband.
There you go. Yeah, nice.
And I mean, for folks who don't know, my husband is an embedded systems engineer and very smart. And he did the first edits. And
Nice.
then, I mean, even after doing the outline for the proposal, Andy made me do a much more detailed outline.
Mhm.
So I never had to really start with a blank page. It was always, this is what I intend to talk about.
Nice.
So that was, yeah. And then I would give them to Andy, and then I would write my next chapter, and then Andy would give me all the changes. And that was kind of confusing.
Oh.
I
But
don't,
that's nice. So you did it piecemeal though. That seems like a more approachable way of doing it rather than writing the whole book and giving the whole book to somebody and then getting all of the edits back. Yeah. Okay.
well,
Cool.
and Andy would,
I know nothing about writing a book, so I don't know what's normal for that process at all. So that's interesting.
textbooks are all different. It depends on what publisher you go with. O'Reilly holds your hand through the process
Mm-hmm.
because they have a style that they want to accomplish,
Mm-hmm.
like practical, I don't remember their name, tends to just want you to have a book and then they'll edit it after.
Interesting.
And I was really glad that Andy was willing to put that much time into understanding the topic, understanding what I was trying to convey, arguing with me when I was wrong. He made it a better book because he didn't understand it that well.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense to me.